Liverpool in the 1800s was often called the second city of the empire. It was a place where the pulse of global trade beat the loudest, a gateway between the old world and the new. From a modest town at the start of the century, it exploded into a sprawling metropolis of commerce, industry, and incredible density. In this video, I use modern AI tools to bring historic paintings, engravings, and prints to life, allowing us to shift perspective, change camera angles, and move through the same scenes in ways their original artists never could. We will see the smoke, the stone, and the ships, as if we were standing there ourselves. First, I want to talk about the lifeblood of the city, the River Mersey. The River Mersey. This view shows the sheer density of traffic on the Mersey during the mid-19th century. In the foreground, you can see the rough waters churned up by a mix of sailing ships and early steam vessels. The river here wasn't just a waterway, it was a parking lot for the world's cargo. You have tall masted clippers arriving with cotton from the Americas, tea from China, and timber from Scandinavia. By the 1850s, the river was so crowded that collisions were a constant risk. If you look closely at the smaller boats weaving between the hulls, you can see the flatties and wherries ferrying goods and pilots. The air here would have smelled heavily of salt, coal smoke, and wet tar. It was a chaotic, noisy scene, filled with the shouting of sailors in a dozen languages and the constant clanging of anchor chains. This chaotic water traffic was the engine of the British economy, but it was also dangerous. Storms could wreck ships within sight of the pier head, and the tides were notoriously difficult. Yet, this river made Liverpool wealthy. Today, while the forest of masts is gone, the Mersey remains the defining feature of the city, and the famous ferry crossing still follows these same historic routes. The Albert Dock. This view shows the Albert Dock shortly after its completion in 1846. It was a revolutionary structure designed by the engineer Jesse Hartley. Notice the imposing, fortress-like walls. Unlike earlier docks, this was built entirely of cast iron, brick and stone, with no wood in the structural frame. It was the first non-combustible warehouse system in the world. In the mid-ground, you can see ships unloading directly into the warehouses. This was a game-changer for security. Before this, theft from open quays was rampant, with river pirates stealing fortunes in cargo. Here, high walls and strict security kept the goods safe. You can imagine the laborers or dockers hauling sacks of sugar, tobacco, and spirits, their work governed by the ringing of the dock bell. However, the work was brutal and casual. Men would gather every morning hoping to be picked for a day's labor. If you weren't picked, you didn't eat. The water here was enclosed, calm, and deep enough for the larger ships of the time. Remarkably, this is a site you can still visit today. It has been transformed from a gritty industrial fortress into a vibrant cultural hub, housing museums and galleries, though the iron columns remain exactly as Hartley designed them. The Custom House. This view shows one of Liverpool's great lost landmarks, the Custom House. Built in the early 1800s on the site of the city's very first dock, it was a massive neoclassical structure with a giant dome that dominated the skyline. It served as the headquarters for the excise officers who collected the taxes that funded the government. By the mid-century, this area was swarming with merchants, captains, and officials. In the foreground, you would see carriages waiting and clerks rushing up the steps with manifests. It was the bureaucratic heart of the port. The interior was just as grand, designed to impress foreign traders with the stability and power of the British Empire. There was a tension here between the wealthy merchants and the government collect. Oars, a constant battle over tariffs and regulations. Sadly, unlike the Albert Dock, you cannot visit this building today. It was severely damaged during the Liverpool Blitz in 1941 and was controversially demolished shortly after the war. Today, the Liverpool One shopping complex stands near where this grand dome once rose, Castle Street and the Town Hall. This view shows Castle Street looking towards the Town Hall. This was the financial and commercial nerve centre of the city. By the Victorian era, the street was lined with banks, insurance firms, and shipping offices. The architecture here is grand and imposing, reflecting the immense wealth flowing through the city. In the street itself, the scene is lively. You see horse-drawn omnibuses, private carriages, and businessmen in top hats navigating the cobbled road. The town hall at the end of the vista, built in the 18th century but expanded in the 19th, stands as a symbol of civic pride. The statue of Britannia sits atop its dome, watching over the city's commerce. However, this wealth had a complex source. Much of Liverpool's early rise was tied to the transatlantic slave trade, and later, the cotton trade, which relied on enslaved labor in the American South. This street was where those deals were signed. The friction between immense wealth and the moral questions of the age was palpable in these boardrooms. Today, Castle Street remains one of the best preserved Victorian streetscapes in Britain, still lined with the same banking palaces, though now they are largely restaurants and hotels, the court housing. This view shows a very different side of Liverpool, the court housing and cellar dwellings. While Castle Street projected wealth, tens of thousands of workers lived in squalid conditions like this. By the 1840s, Liverpool had some of the highest mortality rates in the country. Notice the narrowness of the alleyway. These courts were blind alleys with houses packed tightly together, often backing onto other houses with no ventilation. In the foreground, you might see an open drain or a communal privy shared by dozens of families. The air here was stagnant and foul. Daily life was a struggle for survival against typhus and cholera. The tension here was biological and social. These overcrowded slums were ticking time bombs for disease, which frequently spilled over into the wealthier districts, forcing the city to appoint the world's first medical officer of health, Dr. William Duncan. It was a crisis of rapid urbanization. Most of these courts were demolished in slum clearances during the late 19th and 20th centuries. Today, the sites of these courts are often open parks or modern housing estates, the geography of poverty wiped from the map. St. George's Hall. This view shows St. George's Hall, rising like a Greco-Roman temple in the center of the city. Opened in 1854, it was built to be the finest neoclassical building in the world, a venue for music festivals, and the sheer display of culture. The scale in the foreground is immense. You can see the tiny figures of people on the plateau, emphasizing the grandeur of the columns. Inside, it housed both a concert hall and the law courts, a strange mix of entertainment and justice. The wealthy would come here for balls and recitals, their carriages lining the plaza. But there was a darker drama here too. In the basement were the holding cells for prisoners awaiting trial in the courts above. The contrast between the high culture of the Great Hall and the desperate criminals in the cells below encapsulated the city's divide. Remarkably, St. George's Hall stands perfectly preserved today. It is still the emotional heart of the city, used for gatherings, memorials, and celebrations, looking almost exactly as it did in this 1850s view. Lime Street Station. This view shows the interior of Lime Street Station, the city's primary rail link to London and Manchester. By the late 1800s, the railways had revolutionized travel, and this vast iron and glass shed was the cathedral of the steam age. In the mid-ground, you see the steam locomotives, hissing and venting smoke, ready to depart. The platforms are crowded with a mix of society, wealthy travelers with trunks, businessmen with briefcases, and emigrants with all their worldly possessions tied in bundles. The noise would have been deafening. The screech of whistles and the roar of escaping steam. The station represented the shrinking of the world. It allowed goods and people to move inland faster than canal boats ever could. However, cutting this station into the city required the demolition of hundreds of homes and the displacement of residents, a pattern of progress coming at a cost. Today, Lime Street is still the main gateway to Liverpool. While the trains are electric and diesel now, the magnificent curved glass roof remains a testament to Victorian engineering, the emigration depot. This view shows the bustle around the boarding points for the transatlantic liners. By the mid to late 1800s, Liverpool was the pool of life, the departure point for millions of Irish, Scandinavian, and English emigrants seeking a new life in North America and Australia. In the foreground, the scene is emotional. You see families saying their final goodbyes, luggage piled high on the quayside. For many, stepping onto these ships meant they would never see their homeland or their relatives again. There were boarding houses and runners everywhere, people trying to sell last-minute supplies or scam confused travelers. The tension here was one of hope mixed with fear. The journey across the Atlantic was still dangerous, and the conditions in steerage were cramped. This trade shaped the city's population, making Liverpool one of the most multicultural cities in Britain. Today, this history is commemorated at the maritime museums on the waterfront, but the physical boarding houses and chaotic depots have largely been replaced by modern commercial developments. The Cotton Exchange. This view shows the area around the Cotton Exchange. By the late 19th century, this was the global marketplace for raw cotton. The building itself was a hub of frenetic energy. Traders and brokers would gather to buy and sell futures, their shouting matching the chaos of the stock floor. You can see telegraph boys running through the crowds in the street, carrying price updates from New York and India. This connection to the global telegraph network made Liverpool an information hub. The men here held immense power. A change in the price of cotton could bankrupt a mill town in Lancashire or a plantation in the American South. It was a high-stakes environment. Fortunes were made and lost in minutes. The wealth generated here funded the grand philanthropic buildings of the city, but it was volatile. The original Cotton Exchange building was largely replaced by a modern tower in the 1960s, but the facade of the old structure still survives on the side street, a ghost of the trade that once ruled the city, the overhead railway. This view shows a marvel of the late Victorian era. The Liverpool Overhead Railway opened in 1893. Known affectionately as the Docker's Umbrella, it was the world's first electric elevated railway. Notice how the track runs directly above the busy dock road. In the foreground below, the street is gridlocked with horse-drawn carts and steam wagons hauling goods. Above, the electric train glides smoothly, carrying workers and tourists. It provided a panoramic view of the docks, stretching for miles along the river. It was an engineering solution to the congestion that threatened to choke the port. It allowed dockers to move quickly between the north and south ends of the massive dock system. Sadly, this is another lost icon. The structure suffered from corrosion and was dismantled in the 1950s. Today, nothing remains of the railway except for a few support arches in walls, but the route it took is still Tage. Main artery along the waterfront. Liverpool in the 1800s was a city of extremes. Incredible wealth and desperate poverty, monumental stone architecture and dark, crowded cellars. It was a machine built for trade, running on the power of the river, the railway, and the backs of its people. Through these AI reconstructions, we can see that the city wasn't just a black and white photograph. It was loud, colourful, dangerous, and vital. It feels startlingly close, as if we could step off the curb and walk down Castle Street right now. If there's another city, moment, or specific historical scene you'd like to see brought to life in this way, let me know in the comments. I read them all and use your suggestions for future videos. Again, thank you so much for watching.